Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Philosophical Weightlifting Podcast. I'm your host, Joshua Gibson, and I'm joined today. Well, this is a slightly different episode. The tables have been turned, not literally. Well, actually, they have been. I'm at a new station, as people watching the podcast can tell. The tables have been turned slightly, and I'm joined by a good friend and colleague, Mandi, who is going to put me on the hot seat. And she's going to interview me as we discuss the Power and Strength Summit, which is the recent Strength and Power online conference that was held by Philosophical Weightlifting. So we're going to talk through that. We're going to talk a lot of coach education, lessons learned, kind of what was the impetus or the inspiration for hosting that in the first place, and then biggest takeaways that, from a technical standpoint, what did we learn about performance? And then also from the side of coach education, and then even, possibly from the side of, being in the other side of the business in this space. So I brought Mandi on because she runs a podcast called the Two Girls, One Bar podcast with Wanda, who's a biomechanist and a PhD student at Marquette, which is a fantastic podcast. It's mostly focused on females in strength sports. I've also appeared in an episode, which was a ton of fun. So if people are interested hearing me talk, they can go listen to that. But she has like this excellent set of skills when it comes to asking great questions, interviewing, leading a conversation. So I thought, who better, well, besides Seb, to facilitate the conversation. So Mandi, thank you for joining me.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I can never be the voice of the people, but I can try my best here and at least lead us through the conversation. I can be a far second to Seb, but we can definitely chat through Power and Strength Summit, which I was lucky to be a part of as well. And I think one of the first things we should dive into is kind of how it came to be. So I almost feel like, especially coming off of the episode you did with Seb for your 300th episode, congratulations, by the way, that's a huge accomplishment. I think we should kind of talk about the origins, even into the origins of Coaches Only. Like, why did that exist in the first place? Because I feel like that spurred a lot of what you're doing now with this.
Yeah, so the origins of really all of this, like, interest in coach education really stemmed from the conversations we'd have on the podcast. I mean, basically, I don't know if this is going to minimize the conference or if it's going to glorify the podcast. But basically what we do is we take people we talk to on the podcast and talk through those exact topics with plyometric progressions, power development, strength development, building muscle. I literally recorded a podcast with Jake Rimmert, a handful of weeks and months before the conference. And I was like, hopefully it's not a dead giveaway. Like, hopefully people don't feel like, oh, I'm just going to pay to hear the same thing. So we would bring people on the podcast, and the Weightlifting House podcast, funny enough, before I had joined as a co-host, RIP, my time has come to an end in that role. But shout out to the podcast that's up and running again and recording fantastic content related to weightlifting, specifically as a sport and the athletes who compete in it. So I was a part of that project, and I brought on Spencer Arnold, Leo Totten, and I started getting coaches more involved, and I started to turn that into, from my perspective and my relationship to it, learning more about coaching, learning more about performance, understanding the X's and O's, and that kind of built into, it being just, it's the biggest weightlifting podcast. I would say mine's the biggest weightlifting education podcast. That is just the biggest weightlifting podcast, period. Just millions of downloads and a huge listenership. So that became the source of coach education, information related to training and programming for the sport of weightlifting. And Seb used that as an opportunity to parlay it into Coaches Only, which is, hey, we're going to do the same thing, but people are going to prepare presentations. So we're going to have 8 speakers, an hour hour slots per person, 45 minutes for a lecture or presentation, and then 15 minutes for a Q&A. And then that turned into, basically, I think we ended up with like 5 or 6 events, and I happened to do, I think I did a round table, contributed on a different one, hosted 2 of them, and then presented at one of them. And it's fucking awesome. Like, it's awesome to hear, coaches who, will try to help you conceptualize information, try to help you conceptualize their answers to the big questions we're asking. Philosophical weightlifting is asking the big questions related to weightlifting, which would be, how do I better prepare athletes to perform in competition? How do I keep athletes interested in training, enjoying it, making progress, and then also developing as people along the way. And that was what you would get a glimpse into through Coaches Only. And once Seb kind of lost bandwidth for that, it just stopped being, he's very rational. And when I talk to Seb, I'll have ideas of like, oh, what if I did this? And he's like, I wouldn't do that. That's a bad idea, and here's why. And it's very like profit loss related. It's very rational. It's very, actually, like, I trust him a lot because of that. And if he says something's like probably not going to work or not a great idea, I was like, you're probably right. And I'm just kind of inflating it. So he kind of figured out like Coaches Only isn't something that's in alignment with the brand now. They're really a media company solely, a media / clothing company. Yeah. So they're really interested in creating products. And so funny. I was looking at the Weightlifting House Instagram page today, and I thought for a second, I watched one of the videos. I thought for a second, I'm going to say this, and I'm not trying to draw a comparison. I'm trying to paint a picture. This is just like Hook Grip. And it's just like Hook Grip in the sense of like, this is a media company. This is not Seb. It's like gone away from being Seb. It's gone away from being kind of homegrown. It's gone away from being like him in the training hall at 2019 Worlds commentating Lasha as he's recording it so you can hear him through the video. Like, it's gone away from that so much that it's so refined and so polished and so pretty and so such a great business to then develop as, having more employees, creating more products, doing more in the space. So I thought, like, man, Weightlifting House is such a great media and clothing company, like product company now, that it doesn't really do any of the education stuff. You'll get a tidbit here and there, but that's not the sole focus or the interest. So Coaches Only has received the guillotine in the middle of the city square. And, I thought to myself, there was one day in March where I texted you, Mandi, and I thought, well, I texted you, and I love to do this. It's like an ominous thing. It's like, I have an idea. And then I just got a text in the morning of like, okay, and it's like, okay, let's do this online speaking event. Let's create it and run it like Coaches Only. And, we'll be we'll basically adopt that into, philosophical weightlifting as like the business hosting it. And then that is like this series of online speaking events / coach education related products. And that's exactly what we did. And it ran, and I'm going to say a lot of this, and it sounds like, oh, you're just trying to do the same thing as Coaches Only. And it's like, well, I want it to be that initially because that's what worked and what I know and what made sense. But now we can kind of refine it and adjust it and change it. But I thought it went really well, and it was as much of Coaches Only as Coaches Only was, which I think is perfect.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for those of you who don't text with Josh is the king of the we need to talk, but a different version. And it's always like, I have an idea, or what do you think of this? And he's the king of the we need to talk text. I think one of the things, like, for the future of Power and Strength Summit is how you want it to differ from Coaches Only. Because I think Coaches Only was really an expansion of what the podcast was, right? So Coaches Only felt more to me like, hey, let's take Weightlifting House, all of this coach education from the podcast, and just kind of expand on it. Whereas I think what was done this past weekend really with Power and Strength Summit doesn't feel so much like that. I think it was formatted in a way that was structured to be more in-depth education. And that's not, again, not to downplay the podcast in any way, but I think creating a more conversational arena for continuing education and going into, making sure that people were getting CEU credits for attending the conference. All of that kind of expands beyond just, hey, this is an expansion of the podcast, and focuses in on creating a different type of space for continued education for coaches. So how did you feel that it was different, and how do you want to continue to differentiate and expand on it kind of away from coaches only and into this kind of new thing that philosophical weightlifting is owning?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think you made a lot of great points of like how it did differentiate itself. And I'll kind of continue that with one thing that, Weightlifting House did, and I'm using them as a comparison because I literally love Seb. Like, we send voice notes to each other every day and we talk all the time, and he's one of my best buddies. And I'm always amazed by what he was able to do. Is like this guy who convinced Glenn to go over to the UK to do seminars, and he didn't have a car. He couldn't drive. And he's like, yeah, Glenn, you should totally come do seminars. And he figured it out, got Glenn over. They started, basically working together, and he went from selling, I think it was like t-shirts and a barbell and a book to, this big, massive, like hundreds of thousands of followers and 50,000+ orders shipped. And so what they did is basically the preliminary stages of Weightlifting House was soft goods that were really poorly made. And I don't think Seb would disagree. It was like a Lasha 500 t-shirt, and it was like the shittiest print and the shittiest design. I think of Coaches Only as like, it was that preliminary version of the big conferences. And I don't mean that could come off in a very derogatory way, but I mean that as in, like, I envision this as something that could be, those big sportsmith like style or type of conferences where it's like, okay, you literally have the biggest names in S&C and sports science and performance. And it's so well-rounded and so detailed and done so over the top and so well that it's like, maybe it's held in a venue. Maybe there's like lunches catered. There's a keynote speaker. There's like an intro to the event at the start of the day. So I see it as something that could grow into a really big, and I just want to, realistically, I would love to do that once and then see what happens. But I just want to do it once, is like, take this thing that's a great online event, make it in person, create this like ability to network well, an ability to like interact with people and share an experience, interact with speakers. So I see it differentiating itself from the professional side of get the highest quality speakers, which it did, but do that in a more well-rounded way of here's sports science, here's strength and conditioning, here's all these other things that are very critical to performance that the same coaches who went to Coaches Only are also interested and want to know more about, because their businesses really aren't siloed to just weightlifting. It is also human performance and client retention, kind of call it health and wellness. So my thought is broaden it out, open it up to more of the prolific speakers and researchers and professionals in the space, make it a little bit more rounded in terms of, let's talk, plyometrics, which you might not see it at Coaches Only, or let's talk, have a periodization lecture, or what is sports science? What is athlete monitoring? What are current technological trends in sports science or human performance? And then building those out as conversations and presentations. So that's what I would like to do. And then make it in person so that I want to be on stage and I want to be talking shit and moderating and, being a part of it. So that's ultimately where I think it would go, but that's going to take, I think the first one is successful enough to be like, okay, you do another one. If you can build on that and then kind of see that like growth trend, yeah, maybe people are willing to put up enough money and you're willing to get enough people and they're willing to fly out and you can pay speakers and maybe find people who won't charge you for travel. And, I don't know how you would finagle it, but I think there's a path there for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things that stands out to me from previous conversations that we've had is also with your connections from the podcast, from working on your PhD and just being as involved as you are with sport performance. I think some of the speakers that you will have the ability to bring on are also not just like those well-known names, right? I mean, Sportsmith
Yeah.
does an amazing job, and there's other conferences that do a great job bringing on big names, well-known names, the top names, and you're doing that too. But I also think that you know and are connected to people that people should hear from that maybe they aren't hearing from, and that is a
Yeah.
huge differentiator as well.
No, I think that's a great point. I was listening to a podcast. I forget what it's called, but it's this guy and his dad, and I think his dad's like a, I don't know, psychotherapist, PhD, something. But they're like both interested in psychology, and they were talking about creating content for the sake of the content itself, not for the sake of it becoming popular or becoming going viral or whatever. And I was thinking about that with the podcast. Like sometimes I'll try to get names on, sometimes I'll try to hit certain topics, sometimes I won't, and I'll be frustrated that the download count is lower. So a good example, and just to kind of break the fourth wall a little bit, or at least create some visibility through it. Quincy Johnson was a professor at KU, and he's I saw him at the NSCA conference. Good dude, does a lot of great work, really interesting papers on ins and outs of American football from a sports science standpoint, and MMA, and some programming pieces. And it's okay, this is cool. Had a fun conversation with him about powerlifting and elite performance. That show isn't going to do that well, and it didn't, compared to a Jordan from Barbell Medicine, which also that conversation was fucking awesome. Seb does really well. I know who's gonna, make those numbers move. And I know who won't. And being true to but this is an important conversation to have, or a fun one to have, or someone I want to bring in. It's it's recognizing that's just as important for the brand itself. So I think, to your point, being able to give opportunities to, Jake Rimmert was on the RP podcast. He works with data-driven strength. He's not unknown, but also I don't think he's probably done that of speaking at an online conference before. So it's cool to give him that platform, and he's super appreciative, super grateful. He's just an awesome person. So he reciprocates that in gratitude. So I like having that opportunity, and that's one thing I just appreciate about what I'm able to do now is the opportunities I can give people, how I can connect. Well, I do know someone who can help you out. Let me give you their contact, or let me reach out. I really appreciate being in a position to do that. So I think that is important, especially heading forward. So maybe at the next one, you'll recognize some of the names, and then some of them maybe I've never heard from that guy before. I know he's kind of in the sports science space, but I've never listened to him on a podcast or seen, much of his written work, unless you read a chapter of a book you wrote or something. So I think that's going to be a fun aspect of it.
Yeah. And I think it's an important kind of for the reputation, both of your podcast and of the Power and Strength Summit, is knowing that if there is someone that maybe people haven't heard of, there's a reason for them being on that list, right? You're coming up with a well-rounded lineup of speakers. So just because someone hasn't heard of that specific person, they know that they're going to get something huge out of it, purely because you wouldn't bring them on if they weren't.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And that's a really fun thing to be a part of. So I'm looking forward to curating the list. I know we kind of worked through it tentatively, and people who are really well known in the sports science space will be involved, and people who are in the collegiate setting, we're going to reach out to them, and people who possibly been in the professional setting, and then people who are obviously really high impact in weightlifting. I'm really excited to launch that.
Yeah. When it comes to speakers, how did you make your decisions on the lineup for the first event? What were the things that helped you define, these are the people that need to be there to help us launch this thing?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is, I think we do this intentionally and then unintentionally, but it's kind of that, I'm going to use this example that might add a bit of a unenjoyable flavor to it, but it's the old boys club, that kind of idea. It's oh, I know this guy, we've done work together in the past, I want to bring him in because he's a good buddy of mine and he does good work, and he's brought me in. So Chris Tabor is one of those guys. It's I've known Chris for like since 2017. He's been on the podcast more times than I can count. And I mentioned this during the Power and Strength Summit for the people who weren't able to attend it. His favorite piece of his research he's gotten published was the one that I was the lead author on. And he, to be fair to him, he was the one who really like helped me work through that entire project. Like he basically took me from A to Z to get a publication on my CV, and really cool one. And he edited the Clean and Jerk book that I wrote with Max. Like he's just always been there, always been a huge hand, always been willing to give his time and knowledge. And I was like, I think he wanted to be on Coaches Only, and he's like, hey, if you need me to speak, like I'd be up for it. So when I opened up this and started to curate the guest list, like he was one of the first names to come to mind. I knew the flow. I wanted to work as like human performance is composed of using muscle, kind of crudely, like using your muscles. And it's like, okay, well, how do you train to get bigger, stronger, more powerful? And then what are some of the like ways you do that, which is plyometrics to kind of build some of that capacity into the muscles. And then it's like, oh, and then what about from like a coaching standpoint? And then what about from an S&C standpoint? And then what about like, okay, well, I need to make money while I do this. And then, okay, when there's a call it a mental side to competing and training and being in this for the long term. So to me, it's this idea of like complete human athletic development. And when you break that down, like I see it as component parts, and I just wanted to kind of plug people into those component parts. Tim Suckamel has published so much work on, muscular strength for athletic performance. And Jake is dissertations on, basically how to get as big as possible.
Yeah.
And then you have like Mike Young, who, is like 25 years as a sports scientist, as an athlete, as a researcher, as a coach. And he's literally like, he was at LSU as a GA coaching track and field, with like one of the most prolific coaches in track and field, like period, full stop. So those names kind of just stand out. I know Mike Young, I know his work, I know he's fucking brilliant. And he literally gave the best presentation I've ever seen. Like literally the best. And I've seen a lot. He was
amazing.
Same with Jessie. It's like Jessie's been so generous with her time on the podcast and given so much great information to the people who listen, and she will continue to do that. That I wanted to like bring her in and get her involved. And that's kind of how I conceptualized like who, why, and then what. And I think it turned out to kind of fit into their skill sets pretty well.
Yeah, absolutely. How do you see yourself continuing that as we move forward into 2026? So we obviously have an event coming in January. We talked about potentially doing multiple events next year. So as you think about the year as a whole and what you want to see at Power and Strength Summit, we've brainstormed some of this, and some of our like dream people we would like to speak, of course, but how do you make the decisions? Are you going to continue to attempt to have kind of that well-rounded panel of sport performance, including, the business, the psych side? Is that the plan moving forward, or how do you want it to look?
Yeah, I think heading forward, it's kind of the same, that ends up being the same question you would ask to someone who wants to start a podcast. Like, what are you going to talk about for 300 episodes? And it's like, probably the same thing 300 different ways. And, that's not what it is, but that's what it is. It's looking at what are very relevant, important aspects of performance. And then what are people interested in? What do they know a lot about? What do they know very little about? What's an intellectual curiosity? What's like high impact with athletes in the weight room, on the pitch, with some kind of sports psych professional. And then I can break something down I can basically shatter into 1,000 pieces. And with that, it's like, I'm fucking interested in periodization because people are still asking questions about it. I think it's very straightforward and very simple, but it's like, what is the history or the foundations of periodization? That's a really fun one. And I know the person who is literally written about it and studied it, and I'm going to ask him to talk about it. what is sports science? Because even as someone who, got a master's degree in applied sports science and coach education and has kind of been involved in that space, there's still a little like, what is it? I don't know if there's a consensus, definition. And I think getting someone to express their professional understanding of it is very important. How is that, how is it seen in other aspects of athletics? How is it changed job roles? Technology is a huge one. And then once you talk about technology, you talk about using it well, integrating it. How do you put together a program? See, I mean, that like it just like builds itself. And I, the reason why I hosted the, Power and Strength Summit, we put it together versus anyone listening is because, the way my mind works is it works in a way that allows for that to happen and happen successfully. So I think that I'll just think the way I normally do, and it's going to build out like guest lists and topic lists and make it so it's always something that's interesting, because the thing people aren't going to get with me is a bunch of like fluff and BS and just salesy, like, oh, buy this thing because I need to make money. I need to see something that's having value for it to be worth doing. If it doesn't have value, I can't be invested in it. Like, I'm not going to feign at it. So I think that's a critical part of it, very important, and also like beneficial for the people who are interested.
Yeah, I think the other aspect too, when thinking about this, lineup of speakers that you have brought in and will bring in the future, is who they're speaking to. We had such a wide range of attendees, both in the length of time they've been coaching and the type of business they're running or not running and who they are working with. How do the attendees kind of influence your direction for this event?
Yeah, I think as long as people have their feet in performance, there's a lot to glean from one of the talks, one of the presenters, someone's expertise, and then across the board. Because even, I'm not a bodybuilding, trying to draw parallels. I found interest in, like, I was interested in all of them and learned probably a ton, but I don't coach bodybuilders. I probably, building muscle is not the most primary important part of coaching weightlifters or powerlifters or athletes. It's a critical part, and it serves a role and serves a place, but it's not the most important part. But it's like having that ability to do that part of your job really well is very important. So it's like, if it's part of your job, it probably should be something you acknowledge, nod your head to, and then like work hard to understand. And I think that one thing I also don't bend on, and the high schoolers probably are like, could you just not do what you're doing right now? Which is, I try to not challenge in a dual type of way, but like, I try to intellectually challenge people. It's like, here's high level information, here are high level topics, here's a high level conversation about something that's important. And the reason I'm not going to simplify it or wash it down or make it quote unquote more digestible is because I love for you to just be able to understand it in a more complex way or more well-rounded way or more nuanced way. And that's not to say you don't try to explain things so that people can understand them or introduce them as like something that's not scary or threatening, but it's, hey, this is the physiology of a muscle. That's important to know at some level. So we're going to talk about it. I'm going to bring on experts who can talk about pathways and, all the signaling effects of like training, the nutritional side. Like, you're going to develop a well-rounded understanding of it. And that's important for the people who attend too, of you'll have specific ideas, specific topics, specific aspects of performance you're most interested in. But what you're going to take away more generally is this improved understanding of human performance, a more well-rounded, more complete understanding, so that when you get put into different situations of someone asking about building muscle, building strength, how to utilize plyometrics effectively, how to structure a training plan, like, you'll at least have a coherent answer, and it might be a pretty good one, if you attend the conference.
Yeah, I think some of it is taking, as a coach, as a business owner, whatever that position you may be in, however you're involved in sport performance, all of us need to be shoved outside of our lane or realm of comfort in some way too. So even if it's something that you're not using on a daily basis, or it doesn't maybe perfectly apply to your situation, I think there was so much from every speaker that you could learn from, and just to expand, as you said, your general knowledge of sport performance and human performance is so important. And I think that gets neglected, right? We kind of pigeonhole ourselves into, well, I'm a weightlifting coach, let me just keep reading weightlifting specific things. And we kind of neglect like the outside. I know Jesse and I were texting during the plyometrics thing. Like, I don't think about this enough.
Yeah.
You know, like
Yeah.
we obviously, both of us program plyometrics for our athletes, but we're not thinking about it on that level. And so it's good to be challenged, even if it's something initially you're like, well, maybe I will learn a ton, but it might not be something I'll use as much. I think people would be surprised as to what they'll get out of some of the speakers that they might not initially think it applies directly to them. Or I think sometimes we get, you know, like a new coach and they may feel like, well, this is like too far above what I'm working on right now. And I don't think that's ever true. I don't know how your thoughts on it, but I don't think that's ever true. I don't think it's ever like above. It's just more knowledge that you can learn how to apply to wherever you're at and whoever you're working with.
Yeah. And working at the high school, and I sent you my schedule, you know, it's like,
yeah,
it's like insane. And working there has helped challenge me as a coach in so many different ways.
And as a human.
As a human, and like really I'd come face to face with like, what is this? What am I doing? How am I doing it? Like, and it took me a long time to kind of get a groove with it. But I feel like I'm in a good spot where I do a good job, and I can like rest assured I'm doing a good job, which I don't know if people can like pick up, like understand that, but it's like, I know I'm doing good work, and I know I'm doing the best work I can. And there's no like internal kind of like friction or dialogue of like, maybe not. It's like, no, I think this is like pretty good. And the coaching I do, which is completely different from weightlifting, by the way, like you talk about coaching, you know, 15 people in a weightlifting club, 10 people in like 2 hours, 2.5 hours. It's super slow. Maybe you're there for 4 or 6 and you just get people trickling in and out. It's like, no. It's like 40 people in a room, and it's for 1 hour, and you're coaching everybody. And I had like baseball today at 20. Girls soccer had 31, and it's like 31 for 50 minutes. And we got to get through cleans, and we got to get through this movement prep, and we got to get through the strength work and plyos. And it's like, holy shit. And it's also 31 teenage girls who are freshmen to senior aged. And that challenged me in an interesting way, to where now, though, thinking about weightlifting, it's like, give me a seminar. I would love to do a seminar. Give me 20 people. I'd fucking crush it. I would fucking crush it. Cause like I can coach I talked to Sean Rigsby about this, and his podcast will probably be released after this. We recorded it a handful of weeks ago, but I'm going to post this one sooner. So next week, tune in for the episode with Sean Rigsby. And we talk a lot about coach education, but Sean talked about just watching people coach the floor, and, you know, how important of a skill that is. And that's something I don't think you really pick up as a weightlifting coach, if I'm being completely transparent, just because it's so slow. The demands are so minimal. It's easy because people are just like adults and relaxed and fun to work with. You have but if you have to run the floor with like 20, 30, 40 athletes, and you have a limited amount of time, and you have limited resources, and you have to be creative, and you have to be on the ball. You have to be the one leading the session and vocal, and it's a different challenge. Being presented with that has definitely shaped me as a coach, which I'm appreciative of, and I'm excited to see how it kind of like turns into other areas. That was something I would have never, I didn't even want to do initially, right? But I did it, and it's that idea of like, okay, maybe this isn't the challenge I want, but it's one that's going to level up, change my professional ability. Also, you don't decide by how much it is out of your wheelhouse, or how much more advanced it is than maybe you feel you're ready for. So my whole thing is, and I did this with the Weightlifting House podcast. And I remember telling Seb, because we would record all the time, I'm like, Seb, I feel like I'm just desperately trying to keep up and stay ahead of the podcast so I can have interesting things to talk about, understand training, and present it in a way that people care to listen to about. That continual like approach to intellectual development, coaching development, staying on the ball or staying in front of the ball, pushing the rock up the hill, that is very important too. And I think that is something I present to people with, have Mike Richards on to talk about, his work in basically like aging and, skeletal muscle and, the biology of it all. And it's like, that can kind of be a hard conversation to keep up with, because Mike's been studying this shit for decades at a fucking high level. But it's very important you at least get introduced to it, because you do not know what you don't know what your nervous system is going to soak in. What I would want for someone, and my hope, is that I give you information or provide you with situations that soak in, and then eventually one day it pops out without you actually thinking about it, and you're like, oh, that's kind of cool. I didn't realize I knew that. I didn't realize I could talk about mTOR is a critical part of, the muscle hypertrophic kind of like process. And that's something that like you might not decide to, but if you just are open to, then it'll happen. And then you'll realize like, wow, I do have a lot of room to grow, and I'm capable of growing in that direction at that, at that magnitude. So I think that's the really cool thing about it, is like, hey, here's a bunch of really high level shit that's really interesting and really important. Let's think about it. I sound like such a philosopher. Let's think about it. But like, let's listen to it. Let's think about it. Let's apply it, and let's fucking see what happens, because applying it is also the most important thing. Don't just talk, don't just be able to talk about it, but fucking be about it.
No, I love that you said that you hope it clicks for people down the line. I always think of, when I think of learning, like to me, I always think back to learning a language, because sometimes that's like the most obvious, it's an obvious example, right? You either know the word or you don't. And it takes a lot of repetition. And at some point you're not translating in your head anymore, right? You're not thinking, like, you're not necessarily like counting every rep for everything that you're programming as you go. Like it just comes naturally. Like now I'm thinking in Italian. I'm not translating in my head. And I think that happens to us with this type of knowledge too. Like you said, one day it's going to click and it's going to come out, and you're not trying to process. You're not sitting there being like, what did I hear? This one presentation with Mike Young, the third slide. What did you start to absorb, and it becomes part of your knowledge base that you can apply. With that said, let's talk about the actual speakers from the Power and Strength Summit. I'd love to hear some of your top takeaways. I know we've started to get reviews in from the event, which is really cool to see, on our end, to see that people were enjoying it and getting a lot out of it. But I'd love to hear what are some of the top things that you actually took away from the speakers that we had.
Yeah, I would say Mike, the most important thing you can get from someone is intellectual curiosity. Like that literally is the driving force behind learning. It's not, I have to do this thing. It's like, I really want to do this thing. And Mike fucking delivered. Like, he delivered on it. And I've been thinking so much about plyometrics, and, good on Jesse. Like, cause I get programming from Jesse, and I kind of look at it and, shove some plyo stuff written down, and I'm like, oh, I love just seeing progressions built out. I like, one of my favorite thing is seeing a progression, like an exercise progression. Wow, how corny.
A simple man.
A simple man, yeah. And so like with Mike, he talked about plyos in a way where he talked about compliance. How far do you go? How low do you go when you land, when you jump? How stiff is the system? How much force is being put through it? What changes the force being put through it? Of like horizontal velocities and vertical velocities, and what are progressions and what are movements, and it was just so interesting. It was so deeply interesting. And it's like, he gave me the gift of intellectual curiosity. I would say that Chris has helped me conceptualize power better. And that's important in an athletic standpoint, because I have football coming in now, and the coach said, hey, the day after the game, we're going to lift. I want it to be easy. And I was like, what's easy? Power is easy, because power is like 30% for a jump squat, 70% for like a strength lift, um, up to 85% for a weightlifting movement. It's like, okay, now I can kind of conceptualize power better. And that's important when we're talking to athletes about getting pop in your legs, being twitchy, being fast off the ground. So using methods to develop power. So Chris really locked that in. Jesse just talked a lot about coaching and competing and being involved in the sport. And it just gets you thinking about it like deeply and in an interesting way of like, damn, I really want to do that too. I really want to take that journey. Like I want to be on the journey Jesse was on and is still on as a coach. And then obviously Zach got me thinking of like, how do I level up the business? How do I make a business? How do I make it something valuable that people, want to consume or be a part of? And I would really like to do that. I think I'm maybe at a bit of a stall trying to figure it out because I just get caught up in other shit. But like, I would love for this to be a bigger business, maybe with other coaches, maybe with more formalized coaching side, maybe with more merch, maybe with, more educational stuff. Maybe that's a future thing, but like that feels fun, like the professionalization of philosophical weightlifting. And then I would say, Tim's just a hoot and a holler. He's a great dude, knows a lot about maximal strength. So it was just fun to listen to him and hear a high level detailed discussion of it. And then Zach had a lot of personal experiential stuff he was able to apply. Peter's just getting me to think about emotion regulation, the self, psychological stuff a little bit more, which I always love to do. I just started a book called Existential Psychotherapy. So like that's in my wheelhouse very much. And I would say that like that really, and Jake, of course, I started thinking about fractional sets in my training now. I'm like, okay, if I do 5 sets of back, that's good because it's like 10 fractional sets. And he said we should do at least 11 fractional sets of workout. So those are the things I think I kind of really took away from the talks. And I think Jake's talk on hypertrophy is nice because it clears up a lot of the noise, which is prevalent, always prevalent in deep amounts. So no nonsense from Jake. Soreness is a proxy for this. A pump's a proxy for this. This is their relationship to hypertrophy. This is volume. This is strength. This is how we can conceptualize it from the literature. This is how it works in practice. And it's like, holy shit, that's like a master class on building muscle. So I thought it was very well rounded. I thought it was all very well done. And I'd say that it left me thinking in new ways about old topics, which is very important.
Yeah. Which presentation do you feel like you'll go back and watch again the most?
Yeah, I've already referenced Chris's. I've already gone to the slides and started looking at the physiology of power, the determinants of power. And then I started looking at that and started sussing out some stuff in the available literature on like, he talks about like synchronization, and I was like, I kind of understand that, but I should look at the research and looking into like neural drive as a more of like a physiological thing, not just like, oh, something neural adaptations. Like, okay, what does that mean? So I've been looking into that stuff. Mike's I need to go back and listen to Mike's. I just got to listen to it 1,000 times. This is what I did when I was taking anatomy class, my first semester of college, when I started back in the community college. I would put the anatomy lectures on my laptop and play them while I was making dinner and eating dinner and doing anything and everything. And that's what I'm going to do with Mike's lecture is I'm going to play it all the time, everywhere I go. And you'll hear me in my car with my sunroof open, and you're going to hear Mike's sultry, beautiful, professional voice talking about compliance.
Maybe
so that's the one.
Yeah, maybe that's our next add-on is instead of just the videos, everybody also gets an audio file.
Yeah,
so that
totally.
You can just listen on repeat. We can upload
loop.
The audio files. Yeah, we can put the audio files. So if you want to listen to Mike Young or anyone else while you're eating dinner, you can just pop in that headphone and you're good to go.
Yeah, that's like I used to fall asleep to like rain sounds, like rain noise, whatever, like white noise. And it's like just put on, Mike talking about plyometrics, it's like an 8-hour loop. Just hear him you're going to be so fucking educated on stiffness and mechanics and forces It's going to be awesome.
You've heard of subliminal messaging, but have you heard of subliminal education? Like, you just put that shit on repeat at night and you will dream of plyometrics.
Well, I can't tell everyone my secrets, though. I can't do that.
Yeah, well, you can give them some hints, though. They'll never catch up, Josh.
Yeah.
I loved that you said intellectual curiosity. I feel like that's one of the things that sparked for me most was, obviously, I talked that I don't think about plyometrics even close to enough, but I think it made me want to dig into it so much more. And I think the other thing I want to point out in relation to that is you said you had gone back to reference Chris's slides.
Yeah.
And I think it's important we point out that all of these slides are available to everyone. But they also had so many more resources on the slides. So a lot of the studies reference it. All that stuff is listed and linked on the slides. And so there's so much more material that people can continue to dig into it. I think it goes so far beyond just the presentations from that day,
Yeah, well, I've said this before, and I think one of the beautiful things about the day and age we live in, and there's a caveat, nuance, terms and conditions, which is what Mike knows, everyone can find out. Because, I mean, like, he referenced everything that's, like, shaped his perspective and shaped his approach. You can literally read it all. Like, I mean, no one's just got that under lock and key. All those studies where he talks about forces and, types of jumps and single leg and double leg, and it's there. I mean, all this shit's there. I mean, everything Tim talked about, like, all the research is there. Everything Chris talked about. There's a reason why we're talking to each other and somewhat at each other, is because we've all read the same shit. So if you feel like, I'm really kind of lacking in this area, I'm lacking in the kind of like power or strength, or it's like, suss out the resources. I'm not saying it's that easy, which is why we curate events to be able to do it for you. Because do I want to go look up all the literature on plyos? Like, I really don't. I don't think I could, and I don't think I'd be able to understand it in the way Mike does. But if I can get Mike to then explain it to me, then when I circle back to the literature, I'll have a better understanding. So a beautiful thing about it is all these resources that underpin their understanding of hypertrophy, strength, power, plyos, everything in between. It's all there. Then you get their perspective on it. You get that's what I would call the consensus on it. And then you become a mouthpiece for that information. You then read the research, you then apply it, and then you're the Chris Tabor, right? Because that's not. I think people are like, oh, I'm not an expert. I'm not someone to listen to. I don't know enough. And it's like, I mean, you could be Chris. I could be Chris. Like, I mean, Chris might say I could be Josh. Like, this is what I try to explain to high schoolers. Maybe the context is a little different, but the kids will like self-select leadership roles of like, oh, I'm a leader, so I'll lead. And I'll have to tell people like, hey, like, you can be a leader too, just because you don't feel like you have that air or that title or people treat you that way doesn't mean you're not able to. So that's the same thing for being an expert in this space. Like, Jake's an expert. He came from the same background as me of listening to Ryan Doris and Eric Helms and Lane Norton and consuming that shit on YouTube, like vlogs, like training vlogs, bodybuilding vlogs on YouTube. He consumed that. Now he is one of the experts on muscle hypertrophy, who's on the RP podcast getting interviewed by Mike Israetel. So, how the turns have tabled, or, whatever the funny saying is. That's the idea. And it starts with the Power and Strength Summit of like listening to the experts talk about it, understand it, read the research, apply it, and then be the expert. There you go.
Mm-hmm. No, I like that. I mean, again, I think everybody should go back into those slides, re-listen to stuff, re-listen to the audio files that I'll end up uploading, because now I'm not going to be able to start thinking about that. So re-listen to the audio files while you're driving in your car to your gym or your job or whatever, and then go back and dig into those slides and pull out some of those articles, pull out those research papers, and actually read it. Because like you said, that understanding will be so different now that you have heard from these experts, so that you can work on becoming your own expert as well.
Well, and some people, well, one thing I'll say to follow up on that, some people think, because you'll look at, I mean, I have all these books behind me. I've never read, I actually can't read. but like people read books and they'll thumb through it and they'll say, oh, here's this page that I always reference when I need to think about technique. Like they'll look at the Russian manuals and there's like one is probably written by some Polish, like, expert, and it's on technique. And it's like, holy shit. Like I didn't realize people have actually told you exactly how to snatch, literally word to word, perfectly. And it's like, okay, now I know. Slides can be a resource like that. Like Chris's lecture on power, like that's probably close to one, if not the one he gives in his classes about, teaching sports science. It's like that can be a resource, like a never-ending resource you go back to. So I think it's important to take those like kind of those like binds of this isn't that. This is that, like those distinctions are completely arbitrary. Get rid of the distinctions. The slides are a great resource you can always reference. I'll do that. I'll always go back to Tim's slides. I'll always go back to Chris's slides. Always pull references. Always go back to Mike's. So it's like, see those as a never-ending well of information relating to human performance. I think that's important to not get caught in the trap of like, oh, but it's not a textbook. I don't give a fuck about a textbook. I'm trying to coach people better. Like, so like, what are the resources that will allow me to continually do that well?
Yeah. I mean, and I think obviously there's tons of books. I know you're illiterate, but there are a lot of books that people can read to continue their education. And there's even books, obviously Tim's book, everybody should go buy.
Yeah.
We sent out the link for Tim's book, and books that other of the speakers have contributed to. But yeah, to go back and actually utilize those resources after the fact is so important. And I think the other thing, just me being marketing side of things is, sorry, my microphone just fell over. Me being on the marketing side of things is like, think about the value also that we've been able to provide people through this, because like you just said, this is close to, the presentation that Chris is giving for a course that he teaches, at a university, and you're getting this online, and you can actively ask him questions that apply directly to what you are doing so that you can have a better understanding. I think that opportunity is priceless almost, like you're hearing from this expert, but then also there's this conversation piece after that is so valuable as well.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I agree completely. And I think that aspect of networking is very important, and something I definitely want to maybe highlight or do a continually good job of is, hey, here are the speakers, introduce yourself. Not just like, oh, I'm Jim from Montana. I don't know why I said Montana. I'm Oklahoma. I got Max on my mind. I'm Jim from Oklahoma. I'm Jeanette or whoever from Oklahoma, Terrence. And it's my name. It's like, no. It's like, Tim, my name's Josh. I'm involved in the human performance space. Love your work. Would love to come to Pitt and check your lab out. I'd love to just like cut it up with you. It's like, that's a very critical, that's one of the most useful parts of this. I mentioned Quincy Johnson was on the podcast. I met him at an NSCA conference. Yeah, I met him at an NSCA conference. He got on the podcast, right? Like, so that is a very important part of it. And I think building that out, making that a little bit more like obvious and accessible, maybe like breakout rooms with the speakers of like, hey, we're going to have presentations, and then we'll maybe see if they'd be interested in like separate Q&As or breakout rooms, or just like a little meet and greet thing. I don't know. I'm just literally thinking of that like as it comes to mind, but I think that's an important part of it, is that way you have that intimacy established, so that when Chris says, oh, a job is posted at Sacred Heart or a scholarship is posted, you're like, I could be a candidate for that. And now Chris knows who I am. So I think that's a really useful, cool aspect of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we, as humans, we are more hesitant. Like when the presentation starts, like people are always like slightly hesitant to ask a question, slightly hesitant to introduce themselves in that way outside of Tim from Montana. Like, it's like outside of that, people are very hesitant. And I think that's something that you and I can goal to do a better job of, providing a space and kind of provoking people to do that at the next one, because I think this is where I know a couple people have reached out for consults with a few of the speakers, but all of those speakers provided their emails. All of those
Yeah.
people you can get a hold of, you can ask further questions to, you can have conversations. Like you said, you can ask to go shadow them, to go get in their
Yeah,
lab,
totally.
to watch them in their business, to have further conversations. And I don't think enough people are taking advantage of that.
Yeah.
So I think we
Yeah.
can absolutely provide a way to make that easier. We don't want people acting like, you know, the COVID kids who no longer know how to ask a
Yeah.
question in person, right? Like we really, really want these bigger and longer relationships to form with the speakers. There's so many more opportunities for people than they realize.
Yeah, I'm just gonna, because this is a philosophical weightlifting podcast, I'm gonna read a Soren Kierkegaard quote, which I pulled up. It is a Danish philosopher, and the quote is, "Do it or don't do it, you will regret both." And you think about that, and you're like, what does that mean? It's like, well, if you do it, you might regret having done it. If you don't do it, you'll regret not having done it. It's like, I'd much rather regret having done something than not having pursued it. And to quote Todd Cashton, something along the lines of like, the avoidance route leads to residual unsatisfied curiosity. It's like you have this unsatisfied curiosity of, what if I would have done that? And then he says, like, what if that calcifies? Like, what if that becomes permanent? What if that calcifies like across your lifetime? Like, and you're just living with this calcified, unsatisfied curiosity. It's like, how painful of a life having never pursued something, to see just like, well, what if? And shout out to Julie Fishman, longtime powerlifting athlete who squatted 122.5 at like 56 kilos. She's like damn strong. And she just started law school at 34, mid 30s. And, you know, she has a kid and she has a husband and a full-time job. And she's going to be doing that until 2029. And she's just thinking like, how can I grow as a person? How can I change as a person? And how can I pursue something that like could be really fucking cool down the line? And taking that step is the most important step and the one that's most necessary, I think. And that's what you do when you reach out to the speakers, or just reach out to people on the podcast, or just reach out to people who have something like this information that you're wanting to know more about.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of Todd Cashton, who are your like dream speakers for next year? Like, who would you love to have speak at the Power and Strength Summit, whether in January or otherwise?
Yeah, so I've been running more, and you know, painfully obvious point number 2 that I've had to make on this podcast. I've been running more, and I had my Tuesday training session, and I felt fucking so good. Like, I felt so strong and so locked in, just like so dialed in. And I didn't feel tired at any point. Like, I didn't feel like I was gassing at any point. Like, oh my God, that's a lot of volume. It's heavy. It's whatever. I was like, holy shit, I'm in shape. And I think a lot of that is like, I fucking chewed on, 4.5 miles on Sunday on Saturday. And then I did, 400-meter repeats yesterday. I have a 3.5 mile, like, easy run. And I've been like chewing down mileage recently. I've been walking a ton. And I feel in shape. And Jacob Gooden is kind of like a track guy who also got into sport physiology, strength and power, focused space through ETSU's doc program. And I want to get him on to talk about endurance training for strength athletes, strength and power athletes. And then the inverse. Okay, strength, the maybe we call it the intersection between endurance training and strength and power, or something like that. And it's from both sides of the coin. How does strength and power training influence endurance performance? How does endurance performance influence strength and power training? And then that'd be number 1, Andrew Stewart, who's a sports scientist at University of Nebraska. Have him talk about sports science. What is it? How does it operate at a big collegiate setting, in a big collegiate program, like a D1 massive program? And then I'd love to have those 2 on. Guy Hornsby, who's my mentor and my PI, to talk about the history of periodization. Its roots go back to the gladiators. The roots go way, way back to cycles of training and rest and recovery. And, periods of like more varied work and less varied work. And so I'd love for him to talk about that. I would love for, a conversation around technology and human performance, maybe specifically to start like velocity-based technology or velocity-based training, velocity, tracking technology. And then maybe we expand into, okay, what if you're just tracking like workload? So if we get into like we get into like GPS, which is you wear these units and it tracks accelerations, decelerations, speeds, and it gives you this like proprietary number called the player load. So I say Andrew Stewart, Guy Hornsby, Jacob Gooden, and then flipping more into the kind of coaching space, maybe a Sean Rigsby to talk about like applying this in a high performance weightlifting setting. Also having been, the team lead for USA weightlifting on so many international trips. So those are a few names. Maybe like maybe a Josh Pelland from Data Driven Strength to talk about muscle resensitization and deloads and tapers and periods away from specific training to say like, how does muscle respond to taking time off? And why is that beneficial? If we can do the same amount of work, over, a 6-week span, training 3 weeks of it versus 6 weeks and training all of it, we get the same results in both. Like, obviously you want to train less to get the same result. That's the beneficial side. So those are a few names. And then, I think we came up with a few more that kind of slipped my mind, but those are big ones. And I think those are great topics and people who, it's also important to pick people who know how to present. Those are people who fucking know how to present. And I guarantee Jacob Gooden is going to give Mike Young a run for his money with the best presentation you've ever seen.
Yeah. We'll make that a 10x loop for everybody with the audio when that happens. We'll just loop it a few extra times just so everybody can be sure they can sleep to it at night.
Yeah, perfect. That's perfect.
So as we kind of gear up to wrap this up a little bit, I kind of want to look back a little bit and retouch on your 300 episodes because I, as your friend, I'm excited that you are expanding philosophical weightlifting beyond what you've been doing. So I want to talk about that just a little bit.
Sure.
What you kind of see for the future. Obviously there's no, perfect layout right now. This is an active conversation that's happening and something that you're actively working on. But with the Power and Strength Summit now existing, how do you see this kind of fitting into what you want philosophical weightlifting to become? Because it's no longer just a podcast, right? There's a lot more aspects to this. And I think people will see that on your website as more things get added. But what do you see as kind of the future for this? And how do you want PASS to fit in to what you see philosophical weightlifting becoming?
Yeah, I mean, realistically, one of the coolest things would be like Jesse Stemmo writes an ebook on maybe it's not this, but like an ebook on carries, like weighted carries, right? And that's like hyper niche, but it's like Jesse writes an ebook on like accessory work for weightlifting. Does that make sense? Like that would be a fucking awesome product that 1,000 people would buy. I like guarantee you that I would buy it. and she wrote it for me. She'd write it, and I'd say, Jesse, can I pay you for your time? And then having Chris do a course, on power development or using, power and plyos or something like that, like building a powerful athlete. And he does a course on it. And it's like a 4-part course, and it's the physiology and the science, and it's the applied and how do you coach it? How do you monitor it? How do you assess for it? And, I think maybe even having Chris do a course on assessment and monitoring, for performance. And then having the Power and Strength Summit is something that grows and changes. I would love to do more merch. Like I love the idea of creating good shit, like cool merch, it's like having a t-shirt, no one's bought it. Chris has bought it, Gabby's bought it, I bought it. I bought a few for Julie and Danny. But it, the philosophical weightlifting t-shirt with a Marcus Aurelius quote on the back. Are you fucking kidding me? How many fucking people have read Meditations? It's like, no, there's a literal Marcus Aurelius quote on the back. Like if you're going to gag over, Meditations, like you got to pick up this t-shirt. So doing more cool shit like that, where it's that really cool intersection and I have this in the little Spotify / all the podcasting platform bios for the podcast, which is, it's like philosophy, psychology, human performance, and it's the intersection that you never would have expected and you'll never see again. So I think being able to brand that more strongly and then get it out to people would be really, really cool. And I've been doing that at a snail's pace. But I think that would be really neat. And then being able to like deliver it in a way that's compelling enough for people to want to pursue would be really cool. So like, I'm all about just doing a better job at what I'm doing now and then repackaging it in ways that are more financially viable for myself and then for the people who are involved.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to finish up with something we asked our speakers is, what do you have for a few suggestions on things you think people should read or dig into for some continued education? Maybe for people who didn't come to the first Power and Strength Summit, they should absolutely get on and sign up for the January one while it's early bird pricing. But what would you suggest, maybe like a few things that people can dig into, read, watch, listen to outside of the podcast?
This article has been beaten, more than, a dead horse. I was trying to say something funny. It's an applied method. It's like, I don't remember exactly what it's like, an analysis of weightlifting technique, and it's like an applied method of analyzing weightlifting technique or something. But it's by Shyam Chavda, and Anna Swisher is one of the co-authors, and I think a few other people. But it's basically like a step-by-step applied guide of breaking down pulling technique, and it might even have been the jerk too. But it's like that. I think it's actually under this book stack that the laptop's sitting on. It's like that Russian manual that like literally tells you how to snatch step by step. Like, if you don't know technique perfectly, like I feel bad for you right now. Like literally, like right now with the resources we have available, you should know technique perfectly if you're a weightlifting coach. And I'm very sorry if you don't. So that's a good one. And then I would say reach out to Jesse's. You could reach out to me. Reach out to Jessie about programming, like the way she conceptualizes it, lays it out, the way she sequences exercises, because honestly, she's a great resource for that. And she has a more creative mind of like, where do we start and where are we going to? And then how can we change those, like, what I would call like preconditions. It's like, how do I create these conditions that will allow you to develop the qualities we're trying to develop, the technical pieces and parts, and then get you basically from A to Z. And I think she has a great mind for that. So I'd get a consult with Jessie. I would go read the paper by Shyam Chavda. I would listen to, what's that podcast? I can't think of the name. It's a stupid name with a really dumb host, and he's just like so weird. Oh, Philosophical Weightlifting. I would listen to every episode of that podcast because honestly, like everything I know, I ask questions about and then tell you. And I'd like to think I know a bit about training. So I'd do that. I'd listen to the podcast, listen to every freaking episode. And then I would harass the shit out of Mike Young. Harass the shit out of him. I just absolutely harassed Mike. I told him like, if you listen to for anyone who bought the recordings or bought a ticket or will, I told Mike, I was like, I wish I could just take your brain and like plug it into my brain and they could commingle.
Just like transfer. It's not the
yeah, totally. And you just see the little like file moving.
Yes.
Because I would love to know a fraction of what he knows about plyometrics. So I think that's a great place to start.
Yeah, absolutely. I also want to point out that they are not up on the website yet, but if you did not attend the first Power and Strength Summit, you will be able to purchase the recordings. So we will always put the recordings for purchase after the fact. It will be more expensive than buying the ticket. So even if for the next one, if you can't attend in January, be sure to purchase your ticket because you're going to get the recordings. But we will put the recordings from the first one up for sale. So just to note that for everyone as well.
Yeah, I think that's an awesome idea because there shouldn't be any, realistically, like there should be no like barriers to accessing this information after it's like, oh, it's no, like it happened. It's like, no, that information should exist and be accessible, and not in like a abusing way of like, oh, well, I bought it and I'm just going to share it with everyone, but like, oh, I can pay for it now and get access to it. And that's really, really cool, because I'm sure there's a lot of really interesting shit that I can apply to my coaching practice today that I wouldn't be able to pick up or understand or know otherwise. So,
yeah, I love that. So everybody should go and sign up for the next event. It is January 24th and 25th, I believe, the second to last weekend in January of 2026. And early bird pricing is already available. We also already have a link up for the women's scholarship for the next event.
awesome.
So you can apply for the women's scholarship. News to Josh, it's already up. So you can apply for that scholarship now. We obviously wouldn't pick a winner until much closer to the event, but you can fill that out now. And we will obviously keep posting about all of that. I don't want to wrap up your podcast.
That's fantastic. Yeah, well, and I was just gonna confirm that, that is the end of the episode, which is, I think well worth a 5-star rating on any podcasting platform that you may happen to be listening to this through. And if you're a fan of the show, you can support it by buying a t-shirt at philosophicalweightlifting.com. I actually only get $2 per t-shirt, so that's not going to support it. So maybe do that and then ask if you can, tip me. But seriously, if you need coaching, feel free to sign up through the website. I offer one-on-one remote coaching. And when I say it's individualized, it's like sending you the memes that make you laugh the most type of individualized. Like it's that deep. Like that's the through line there. So if you want coaching, if you want continuing ed, you can go for the Power and Strength Summit and the recordings there, the future events we're going to hold. And then philosophical weightlifting everywhere else. I'll post tidbits and little, bite-sized pieces of training related information on Instagram. So you can follow me there at Josh_Phil WL. That's PHILWL. Philosophical weightlifting for the podcast, the coaching, and the con ed. And Mandi, if people are interested in keeping up with you and your weightlifting / performance / marketing shenanigans, where can they go?
Yeah, you can follow me at Mandi Murakami on Instagram. Josh can link it because it's easy, but nobody can spell it. And you can also follow the podcast at 2 Girls 1 Bar Pod. If you want to hear some really cool women's strength stories, you can also go back and listen to Josh's episode where we do talk about the Power and Strength Summit. So definitely check that out as well.
Awesome. And everyone go listen to the episodes with Danny Myers-Glenn.
Yes.
Because she's the impetus for a lot of what we talked about on the podcast. And now that I say that, at some point we'll be fundraising for the trip to South Korea. So if you have extra money that just happens to burn a hole through your pocket, please deliver it to whatever outlet we're going to be pushing that through. We thank you all for tuning in to another episode of this week's, well, I guess it's not this week's, another episode of the Philosophical Weightlifting Podcast. We will catch you next time.